Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Praise be to the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Come on, we can do better than that. Praise be to the Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen. I want to go ahead and dismiss the kids for Kids Church.
So that greeting I just gave you guys is the greeting that all the pastors we met in Kenya gave us. And the congregation in unison would answer loudly and proudly because they were proud and happy to be Christians. So that was a test for you guys, so there'll be a quiz later. So I chose this picture. Rose and I were married last year on our family's bison ranch over in Blanchard. And I want to introduce ourselves first before we go into our mission trip because it kind of plays into how we ended up in Africa. So we both were living in California. We met at college there at Santa Clara University. We met in the dorm rooms at college, and we were engaged to be married after we graduated. And we were both working for Fortune 500 companies down in the Silicon Valley in California, and we had a good life. We were graduated, we were engaged, we had good jobs, and life was good. But we felt this calling to actually leave our jobs and move back to Spokane, Washington. My family has a family business over in Spokane, and so we were feeling called to go there, but we were unsure. So we wanted to prayerfully consider that decision. So we went to a retreat in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California that was led by another church, and it really got us in tune with God again, and we felt that it was the right decision to leave such promising careers and move to Spokane. And that was a catalyst to everything that happened after that. So we literally loaded all of our possessions into a trailer and drove from California all the way to Spokane in one day. It was a 15-hour trip. And so we get home, we're just exhausted, and we go right to bed when we get there. But when we woke up in the morning, this 15-hour drive, we're exhausted. We just moved our whole life. My dad says, "Okay, I got an activity for you guys today, so just get rested up, and I'll see you guys this afternoon." And so, literally, the first day that we were in Spokane, not like it felt like the first hour. My dad had us meet with a realtor to go look at homes because we were going to be living in their basement for 6 months until we got married, so he wanted us out of that house as soon as possible. But I was in the basement. Rose had my brother's old room, so we were in separate rooms, but in my parents' house. I'm sure Rose was stoked about that too. So we were living with my parents, but our first day we already were looking for homes. And then the next week we started our new jobs. We both work for the family business now. So we have new jobs. We're planning a wedding in July. We're looking at new houses, so things are just piling onto our plate. We're busy from day one. And the responsibilities of all that started mounting. More and more decisions had to be made. And these were big decisions for our lives. So where to go on a honeymoon? How much do you spend on that? Where do we build a new house in a neighborhood that we really like? Do we go find an older house that's more affordable and be more frugal? What is God's plan for us? We didn't want to be outside of His will after following His will to come home. So we've been attending Life Center Church. So what we do is we live in Spokane. So when we're in Spokane, we go to church there. And then when we visit the ranch, we come to church. We usually are in the early service here at Spirit Lake. And so we're attending Life Center one morning, and it's a congregation of 3,000 people. It's not like here where you might sit by the same people or sit across from the same person every week. You sit by someone new every single service. So we sit down, and I happen to sit down next to this guy named David Opop, and he's a key part of this story. But I sit down, and it's by chance, but no, it's God's plan that I sat down next to him that Sunday. So I'm sitting here, David's here, and then Rose is sitting next to a whole, other people over here that we've never met too. So she turns and talks to them, and I turn and talk to David. So Rose didn't even meet him that morning. And I say, "Whoa, so, how are you? Where are you from?" He goes, "Oh, I'm from Kenya." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, wow. What are you doing here in America?" And he's like, "Oh, I run my own nonprofit." It's just kind of a cordial, casual conversation, thinking I'm not going to talk to him ever again type of thing. And church concluded, and I kind of told Rose about meeting him. She was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And that was that. And then the next Sunday, we had a meeting with our realtor, again, to talk about the possibilities of building a new home or continuing to look for another home. And we left that meeting with our realtor just kind of not feeling good. We were just, we didn't God's not giving us an answer. We want to make a decision. If we're gonna build a house, we need to make a decision quick because you got to choose the lot. And we didn't feel very good about anything that was going on, and so we got in the car and we were silent. And we said goodbye to our realtor, and we said, we have to go to church now. And we went to church, in silence, basically. And we walk into church, and worship's going, and we're kind of just quiet. We're not really worshiping. We're just kind of have our heads hung down low, and we were in contemplation. And the very first verse of the sermon, which I don't even know how it pertained to the rest of the sermon, to be honest. I can't tell you that. I swear this verse was just for our answer alone, because I'm sure that's the only reason why it was there. No. It reads as this: build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce, marry, we're planning on getting married, marry and have sons and daughters, find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so they too may have sons and daughters, increase in number and do not decrease, and basically just says prosper. And this was talking to the church in exile, the Israelites in exile during this time, but the answer was right there. Build houses is the first two words. So I immediately perk up, I'm like, I don't know if Rose is paying attention, but I feel like that's an answer. And then the rest of the sermon had nothing really to do with that verse. It was all about the mission field. And then that verse in Luke that I'll also read, because it's a key verse to what caused us to go to Africa. It's Jesus speaking, and he says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Go, I'm sending you out like lambs among the wolves. And it's go with an exclamation point. It's like, don't sit there, don't think about it, don't pray about it. I'm saying go right now. That's what he was saying to us. It was a direct message, I believe, from God. And so the rest of the service was about David, who I met the week before. It was about his nonprofit called Spring of Hope. He was featured for like 10 to 20 minutes of the service, told all about the programs he does, and was basically like a sign to me that is something we could go and do, is go to Kenya possibly. So we get out of that service, sit in our car, and I look over at Rose and I said, so I'm pretty sure we're supposed to build that house. And she's like, yep. And I go, and I think we're supposed to go on a honeymoon to Kenya. And she goes, yep. So he was speaking to both of us that morning. So let's see here. So those decisions were made, and we were actually married on July 27th thereafter by Pastor Kim on our family's ranch. That was that photo on the other slide there. And we were moved into our new house by August, the next month. So my first day in Spokane, we were looking at houses, and our first month of marriage, we were in our new house, which is a blessing from God. And we also had the call to go on this trip to Africa.
So these are pictures that we actually took on our trip, and I know we are all very educated, and you have seen photos of people in Africa who don't have material wealth or who are hungry. So we're not wanting to spend a lot of time talking about that, but we do want to say it is important, and it was apparent when we were there. People have tattered clothing, and they live in very small shacks that we would not consider houses here in the U.S. But one thing that we really learned when we were there was that Kenyan people are spiritually wealthy, even though they lack money. So we saw this everywhere we went. It wasn't that we were just in this one small area. We went to many different villages, and it was really, really interesting to see this. So the first picture there on the top left, that's the church that we went to for Sunday service on the first Sunday when we first got there. So that's their church, and they don't have electricity there, but they bought a generator. So they have speakers inside there, and it's blasting out African music, and there's like 5 pastors up there giving a message, and there's so much going on, and they are packed in there. And it's summertime, so it was hot, and you're packed in this close next to somebody else because there's so many people in there in that tiny building. So that was really great for us to see, is how they are strong in the Lord, even though, because they have to be. Because here in the U.S., maybe if we get sick, we're not so worried that we're going to die every time we get sick, because we know that we can go see a doctor and pay for it. But there, if they get sick, they're down on their knees begging to God. They're praying for their life because they might not recover. And then the next picture on the right is the the kid in the blue shirt, his name's Felix. He's actually one of our sponsored kids that we got to go and meet there and go to his house. And that's his brother on the right, Brian. And their father passed away, and their mother actually works in a town far away from home, so they don't have any parents at home. He's in 5th grade, and Felix is the man of the house. So imagine that. I mean, it was very striking to see that, but he's happy. They're happy. And it was just very fun, and it was a blessing to meet them and be around them, because even though they don't know what is going to happen in their life, they don't know if they're going to make it through school, they don't know if they have enough food to make it through the year, but they're happy. And you can see that in that picture. They're smiling and having fun with us. And then the next picture below that is those 3 old, they call them mamas in Kenya, like we would call a grandmother. They just call them old mamas. And so those are David's moms, and you're running through them. It was so strong. There's a few times in my life where I can tell you that I really felt the Holy Spirit, but when we met them, it was apparent. And then the last picture on the bottom left is we got to visit a prison in Kenya, and they welcomed us in. And so we're walking into the prison yard, and we hear this beautiful worship music. We don't know where it's coming from. We turn around the corner, and we see all the prisoners are there waiting for us, and they're singing a praise song to welcome us in. So that was really a breath of fresh air and refreshing and surprising to see, because we really didn't know what to expect at the prison. I thought it was going to be very scary, and that they were going to be standoffish, like if you would think that someone who's incarcerated would be, but they were spiritually wealthy also.
So we wanted to highlight the positive there, because it really was almost like I felt like there was more, the Holy Spirit was more in that prison than I feel like in a supermarket in America. I can't explain it. Like, you run into people every day and you don't feel that, but we're feeling that even in prison there. But they do need change regardless of all that positiveness, because really they are experiencing the best you can have out of life, a relationship with God, but they still have a lot better life they could be having if they had some basic needs met. And one of the main things is the change in their water habits. So that picture of that river that you see is considered a clean water source. So we would never consider that clean. It's brown water. There were bugs, and I saw some trash in there and stuff, but that was clean because it's running, and it's not a stale, stagnant piece of water. So that young man you see there with the motorcycle and the yellow buckets on his bike, his job, what he did for a living, was he owned the motorcycle, he drives to that river, fills it with clean water that people are paying, the people that do have money are paying him, maybe in a chicken or with money to go fetch clean water for them, and it's not clean, but that's one job there of how they get water. And then the water source below that is a pond. It was actually dug by Spring of Hope. So they put that water there, and you're thinking, well, why would this American nonprofit, put in another dirty pond? But that's just it. That's just water for them to have. They normally wouldn't even have water right there if they didn't dig that. And then what they train them to do is boil the water so that it becomes purified, and they can actually drink it or use it in cooking. And all those kids you see next to it, they all live right by that waterfall. They live within a kilometer distance around there, and that's one of their water sources. So they do need some change. And enter that change is David. That's a picture of him right there, wearing his Spring of Hope t-shirt. He founded Spring of Hope himself after graduating from a university in America. He got out. He escaped essentially an impossible situation. 4 of his siblings died of waterborne illness. He was in hospital as a 3-year-old, and they actually changed his name to David when he lived, because they said, he's blessed by God, is what they believed, because he lived when he should have died. And he got out, he got to America, and most Kenyans will get to America and they'll never look back. They come here and they take advantage of what's going on here, and maybe they're very thankful and everything, but rarely do they actually, remember where they came from or do anything to help it. And David went back home, and he realized that I can't accept God's grace in my life like this without doing something about what's going on back home. So he's devoted his life to Spring of Hope, and that's what he does for a full-time job here in Spokane. So he lives and works in Spokane, but he's talking to Kenya every day on the phone, and he travels multiple times a year to Kenya, and that's where the country is on the African continent there. You can see it's pointed out. So that's who we're going, that's who we went with, and that's who we worked with on this thing. It's because of him that all these projects are going on. And so they have 5 overarching missions, so to say, and then there's projects beneath each overarching section, so to say. So the first one is education and sponsorship, and I personally love this one. This is, in my opinion, this is the real change that's going to happen in that country, and it's educating the next generation. So you can sponsor a child, and so Rose told you we sponsored 4 kids going into our trip, and those are our 4 kids there. The 2 boys are on the left, and that's Felix and Douglas, and then Melva and Marv Olivia are on the right. So we had 2 boys, 2 girls when we went there, and we got to give them soccer balls and look in their face and see where they lived, see where they go to school, see what was, how their lives were better and how they could still be better, but they were better because they were being sponsored. So that struck a real chord in us while we were there. So as soon as we got back, we added 6 more. So those are the 6 kids at the bottom. Those are our new ones, and we're praying for them, and we'll have to go back and meet them too, because I want to see, it's very tangible to me to see what God's doing in their lives specifically, because they could just be dead tomorrow if they weren't sponsored. So David knows the importance of that, because he was never sponsored, but he knows that more of his kin can be saved if they're sponsored and have a leg up. So the next part is economic empowerment, which Rose will go over.
I'm a total economics nerd, so this is my favorite one. But the picture of the older gentleman there, his name is Pastor Samuel. So he was a pastor in that community, and he also was a farmer. And so one of the projects that Spring of Hope did was they partnered with the USAID to bring 2 farmer trainers to this village, and they trained 90 farmers on different crops they can be growing that are drought resistant, different farming techniques that they can be doing with the limited resources that they have. And for instance, they're growing butternut squash now, and watermelons, and tomatoes. Whereas before they were subsistence farming, where they would grow some corn, and then at the end of the year, all they ate was corn, and they have no money. But now they are able to bring some crops to the market and sell some, and also have better nutrition as well. So that's Pastor Samuel. He's one of my favorites just because he's just so wise and a good mentor for the community. And then the picture on the right, her name was Mary, and she was trained by a group that Spring of Hope partnered with called CHE, Community Health Evangelism. And CHE is actually in the United States as well, in poor communities, and they're all over the world. But they brought in some trainers and trained them on how to live spiritually, and also how to have better health, and how to keep things clean and tidy around your home, and also how to maybe start a small business, because there's not really an economy in these tiny villages so far away from cities or towns, and they don't have cars or anything. So she started a small business. She built a little kiosk out by the road, so she sells her tomatoes and things she grows in her garden. And she's a new Christian as well, so she was on fire. She welcomed us into her home, and she's like, "Oh, come, pray for me, pray for my house." She was so happy. And we didn't go there and give her money. We didn't go there and give her something. All they did was provide her with some training and some love and some Jesus. And she is on fire. She said, "I used to sit here and feel sorry for myself, and now I say, this shoulder, this is the husband. This shoulder, this is the wife. I can be both," because her husband's passed away too. So now she does everything, and she's not afraid.
She said Jesus is her husband now.
Yeah.
And that's her kid's father is Jesus. So some of that agriculture training that Rose touched on there's pictures here, the fruit of that training. So those greenhouses there, what they are is they're just cloth. It's just cloth blocking the plants from the sun is what it is. and then there's an irrigation system in there, and then that's a picture of inside the greenhouse, that really green crop you see there with the yellow lines coming down. That's tomatoes that they've grown in there, and it's flourishing. Like, I wanted to grab a tomato right off the vine. It looked so delicious. It really did, and that you're literally seeing the fruit of the training. And then above that is David holding a watermelon. He smuggled watermelon seeds in from America, which was technically illegal, but he had them in his pocket or something, and gave them to the farmers. And now there's watermelons in their region, which is a perfect region for that because of the sunshine and things like that. And then the other picture there is of the other farmers being interviewed, because there was a documentary being made at the same time as our trip, and they talked about how excited they were to actually see real plants growing crops. They're not used to that. They're used to their crops failing and sometimes producing or producing very little. So it's really cool to see the actual plants in the field and see a real harvest for once. And then going back to what we were talking about earlier, the water and sanitation problems that I touched on earlier, they're doing real things to change that. So I showed you that pond they dug. They actually have legitimate wells too, so those people with all the buckets surrounded around, you can't really see it, I think, with the zoom there, but there's a well there that they hand pump water out of the ground, and that's clean water. When you see that water, you guys would say, yeah, I drink that. It's like a water fountain. It's clean water coming out of the ground. And the funny part about that picture is before I took it, right behind there, those houses you see, that's where David grew up. So he drilled a well right in front of his family's house to hook them up, basically. He drilled another well in his village at the school, and they repaired a well that was in disrepair. And so there's 3 new wells in that region because of that. And then they also build those water catchment tanks that catches rainwater that comes off of the roofs and then can be used at that building where the water catchment tank is. The other picture there is of a latrine. They don't have toilets. They're not used to having toilets. They don't know what a running water toilet is really. But you can have a toilet even if you don't have running water. You dig a big hole in the ground and then build a seat over it is basically what it is. And they showed them how to do that and showed them that it's very easy to do, and they can live a cleaner life just with a latrine. And then the final thing is just educating them on proper sanitation. So I don't know if you can tell in that picture, but it says Victoria Butchery, and there's a cow leg hanging in the window, and it's like 80 degrees that day. And Christian was telling me that the bison meat at our ranch, over 50 degrees is when bacteria starts setting in. So we probably ate some of that while we were there, and thank God we live. I mean, they probably cooked it really well, but it's just they don't know it, or they don't have refrigeration. They don't know that it needs to be. They're just like, we just hang it up and sell it. So things like that they can change one step at a time. And then the big thing which we really care about and where we really see the spiritual changes, the spiritual development stuff. So we mentioned that we went to a prison there, and that man right there in front of the prisoners facing them, both of his parents died when he was like 10 or something, and and they were actually fairly wealthy for Kenyan culture, and he was going to school with his siblings. As soon as his parents died, that stopped. They didn't go to school anymore. He became a gangster. He bought a gun and would rob people and beat people up and steal from them as a job. That was his job. It was every day go out, who am I going to rob today? Well, they have a thing called mob justice in Kenya, and if you try to rob the wrong people, they're not going to take it very kindly. So they literally beat him within an inch to his life and left him on the side of the road basically to die. You're filth in our society. We don't want you. And they essentially beat him to kill him. The police saved him. They found him on the side of the road. He was in a hospital for 2 months, and then survived that hospital visit and went to prison afterwards because he was a criminal. Was in prison for 3 years and was saved in prison by a prison guard there. And so now he goes to the prison that he used to live in and preaches the message to them. And and that was another prison that he didn't stay at that prison. He's preaching a message as a prisoner to prisoners. And he's changing their lives because they can relate to him like no one else can. And the other crazy part is he's a pastor now, so the guard that saved him is now a part of his church. So now he preaches to the guy that saved him. And the other picture there, what Spring of Hope's doing, well, they employ Pastor Ken, but also they're training pastors. So those men sitting in front of David just got news that their pastoral training for the next 2 years is paid for by Spring of Hope. And these men walk miles barefoot or ride a bicycle for miles just to get to this training. And they don't have libraries like we do. So for them to have some simple biblical training as a pastor is amazing. And we were tearing up just watching them. We looked in their faces. We were sitting across from them while they got that news, and it was just really powerful. So We tell you all of these stories from our trip, and it was, as you can see, it's a really successful trip. But it's not just a trip that ends, and then we go back to our normal lives. I hope hearing this message, and we know going there, changed our lives, and it will change your life when you start listening to the call of God. God called us there, and we fulfilled His call, and I can't explain to you what it's like to be in that presence. It's like nothing I've ever experienced. And so when we got, at the very end of our trip, we go to Nairobi, which is the capital, and we fly out of Nairobi. And David has told us I have some property in Nairobi, and I've been building a house there. So of course we asked him, hey, can we look at your house? We want to see your house. We've seen everywhere else. Show us your house that you own. So he took us to his house, and he's really shy about it because he feels like having any wealth is like he needs to be giving away. But what he's been doing is for 10 years, he's been scrimping and saving every little $100 here, $100 there, and putting it towards building this house. And it's a pretty big house. It's a 5-bedroom house that he's going to build for Spring of Hope. Even though it's his personal thing, he's going to use it for mission trips. He'll house missionaries there and house future trips to cut down the cost, to allow more people to come to Kenya and serve God. So it's a very selfless thing, even though, from an outside eye it might seem like a selfish thing, but he's actually doing it for God and out of, cash out of his own pocket. So you can see it's near completion. It's almost done. It really is. And so I asked him some simple questions while I was there. I said, David, when's your house going to be done? And he said, well, it could be done next month if I had the money. So he's like, man, I wish it was done. And then I said, well, what's stopping? Is it the materials in Kenya or something? He said, no, it's purely money. He goes, with a certain sum of money, I could finish my house in 1 month, literally. And I could tell it was bittersweet to him because it was so close, but yet so far. Because that sum of money it's large to any of us, but it was specifically large to him. It's going to be another decade for him to finish it. So anyway, that happened at the end of the trip. We flew home, and we've been back now since February for a couple months. And so I felt another call in my heart that I couldn't answer for the longest time. I was praying and praying, saying, God, what do I do with this new information? What am I supposed to do with my life here that's different? And I got no answers. It was kind of like those 3 months of looking for houses. Like, nope, just keep looking and searching. I'm not going to tell you anything. And so I'm kind of struggling with that. And so one day I go into work, and I'll tell you guys something that you probably haven't heard before, but I'm a Christian car salesman. I know that seems weird or not possible, but it is. Believe it or not. And one of the guys I work with, he's like my older brother. His name's Robert, and he goes, George, I'm going to buy a new car. I'm going to buy a new cool Escalade or something that's really fancy. Is what I can't remember exactly which car, but I go, Robert. I think I'm armed with this new message from Kenya. Don't get something that's so ostentatious and look at me and impractical. You have 3 kids. Get something practical for your 3 kids and just serve that. That's all you need. And I was really speaking about a speck in his eye when I had a plank in my own eye, because I drive a rear-wheel drive, gas-guzzling 2-seater Camaro. So he quickly turned that on me and says, really, you're one to talk. And he said exactly what I just said. You drive a car that you can't even drive in the winter, and all the reasons why. Now, normally that's normal banter, so to say, between him and I, because we joke with each other a lot. But that struck a chord with me. I was pretty silent when he said that to me. I was like, wow, I thought of that verse. I have a plank in my eye right now. How could I even say that to him? So I kind of was a little bit down and out about that. So then a couple weeks after that, our friend Mike Kaiser lent our family this movie called The Ultimate Gift. And he goes, I watched this movie. You guys got to watch it as a family. So we put it on. And if you guys haven't seen the movie, I hadn't even heard of it, but you should watch it. It's worth a watch. There's one movie.
Ultimate Gift.
It's called The Ultimate Gift. And here's the premise of the movie. It's generosity and relationships trump material wealth. That sums up the whole point of the movie. So and it's so well done that it impacts you, at home, because it's a visual movie you can watch. And the cool part about it is it's not about Kenya or anything. It's about people in America understanding that they're substantially blessed and then doing something about it, and making relationships and doing things with their wealth for the kingdom. And so, of course, that same chord was struck in my heart when we watched that movie. And so then a couple more days go by, and I'm sitting in bed, and it's 1 a.m., and I think I had a Dr. Pepper too late in the day or something, but I'm awake in bed, and I'm not agitated or anything. I'm pretty content. And I really felt like I was in God's hand at that moment. If you guys could understand what I mean by that, it's just you feel like you're in the right place. And so I'm thinking about everything that happened in the last year. I said, here I am, I'm a young man, I'm in my own home. I have my beautiful wife asleep next to me. I have a golden retriever puppy in the backyard. We have our own kitchen. We literally have a white fence. You know, it's like the cliche American dream. And so I'm walking around my house in my mind, and I go, I have my own garage. It's a 2-car garage. I walk into my garage and I go, and then I have my own Camaro. And as soon as I thought about my Camaro, that everything connected in my mind. Now, I say that God spoke to me, but it's not an audible voice I heard. It was just a connection of God's plan that I was now in line with. And he told me, he said that there was a decision that was obvious. He said, the amount of money it costs you to sell your Camaro could pay for finishing David's house. He goes, think about that. You know, you watch this movie, you're so content. You know, you had that conversation with Robert. He goes, and I just knew that I had to sell my Camaro to finish his house. Now, that seems pretty easy after hearing my story, but I love that Camaro. I still love it. It's the new body style, the new Camaro. It's the exact color I want. I've told people for 5 years that I've owned it. I paid it off myself. I said, I'm never selling this car. It goes, it's my first new car. I'm never selling it. I want to give it to my kids when I'm, gray and old. And I go, I'm going to own this car my whole life. And I would people would offer to buy it all the time and be like, you'd have to pay me $50,000. I'd make up some big number and then they'd say pass, So I said I'd never sell this. So God was challenging me deeply. He was really cutting to something that I said I would never do and saying, will you do it for me? And I knew I needed to. So then I get up out of bed after I come to this realization, and I go and I get on my computer and I devise this elaborate plan to triple the value of my car by thinking up ways to have celebrities sign the dash or sign the steering wheel and then bring it to some big auction because I'm in the car business and I'll get lots of money for it and it'll all be for God. So I devised this elaborate plan, and I'm praying about that. So then the next weekend, so this is 2 days after that, I get kind of a spur-of-the-moment trip to Seattle for business to go to an auction there. And we arrive in Seattle, and I don't ever go to this auction. I go once every 3 months. It's rare for me to be there. So it was part of this plan again. And we show up there, and the shuttle picks us up, and they go, oh, we're picking up a guy named Mike on the way to the auction. And so we go, and it's Mike Kaiser, our friend. And we're like, oh, hey, Mike, it's funny running into you. And it's the guy who gave me the ultimate gift movie. And he gets in the car and he goes, hey, G4, it's weird you're here. You're never here. He goes, it's weird. I was thinking about you last night and your trip to Africa. And I was trying to think of this way we could sell a Camaro for celebrities and give it to your Africa nonprofit. He just said that to me. And I was like, oh my gosh. I really do have to sell my Camaro. So he floors me with that message, but you know what? I felt good about my idea for the celebrities, right? I was like, cool, it's God speaking. I'm going to do the celebrity thing. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be fun. And I don't know how I'm going to do it. So then, as I'm prayerfully considering how to make this elaborate plan work, I start praying to God, and His real plan starts to become apparent to me. I prayerfully consider what I now call my illusion of grandeur. I was making up this big, worldly way of raising money, and God began to show me that my plan for involving celebrities was self-fulfilling. I would get some glory from that because I would be on stage or whatever with a famous person, and I would be involved with it, and people would know that I did it. And so I could tell that I felt this feeling that wasn't supposed to be, but I didn't give it up either. I just kind of said, okay, God, if you think I should sell it how it sits, I go, just give me an opportunity and I'll look for it. But I'll be very specific, and I won't just willy-nilly sell it or something for a cheap price. I want to get a good value out of it. So the next Saturday, God led me to park my Camaro in front of work. So
which was last Saturday.
This is last Saturday. This is a week ago.
Yeah.
So I normally park in the back at our dealership. I don't like parking in the front. I like to be humble is how I think of it. Park in the back. No one can see my Camaro or whatever. And so I literally went in reverse. I was going to go out back, and it wasn't God. I didn't think God at the time, but I just go, I'll park in front today. So I back up and I park in front, and that's where everyone can see it. People driving by can see the car there. And so I park the car out front, and then I'm with a customer not long after that, and I'm on a test drive. And when I'm on a test drive with a customer, I never answer my cell phone. I think it's rude to answer a call when you're with a customer because you've got to respect who you're with. But I look at my phone to turn it off, and I see it's my brother. Reason. So I answer my call, which I never do, and he says, "Hey, George, where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm on a test drive, like, I'm hanging up now," is basically what I was telling him, and he goes, "Well, there's some people here that wants to look at your Camaro." Now, I told you I've said no to people over the 5 years, and people will come in and say, "Oh, I want to buy your Camaro," but it's always like more money than they think, or it's too, I don't want the big engine, or whatever reason. There's always a good excuse for them not to get it. So I'm thinking, it's going to be that same old thing, like, oh, I'm just going to show them, and they're going to be like, "Yeah, no, sorry." And so I come and bring my key to them, and this is how specific their search was. And I say God sent them because it's his plan. He sent a father and his son from 3 hours out of town to look at a truck at our dealership. And then they were going to go look at an SS orange Camaro with white racing stripes at another dealership, which is the exact car I have. So they go, "We came to town to look at 2 cars, a lifted truck on your lot and that Camaro." And they go, "We just happened to see yours out front. So we stopped to ask if it was for sale." And long story short, they ended up paying cash for my car and at a premium. It wasn't like they got a deal or they paid even fair market value. They paid a little bit above fair market value to buy my car because I told them where the money was going, and they knew that they were there for that reason and that time in their life too, and it was God's will. So I sold my car, but God knew I was weak. I'm a weak man because I love that car, and so guess what he did? He put a nail in my tire. I don't know when, maybe on the drive to work that morning. But we look down and there's a nail on my tire and there's a Leschwab across the way, and so they repair tires all the time for us. And another salesman points it out to me. He says, "You should probably go over there and get the nail repaired for him because they're going to drive 3 hours out of town today in the car." And I said, "Yeah, definitely." So I go drive it across the street, and they repair the tire, and I get in my car, and I start hyperventilating and breathing really hard. And I'm like, "This is a lot of money. Like, I love this car. Like, maybe I can get the money in a different way, or maybe they'll say no, or I'll tell them no when I get back to the dealership." And I'm freaking out, and I'm literally hanging my head at the stoplight, just sick to my stomach. And I kid you not, I look up. I get goosebumps right now saying this. He knew I needed an answer, and so I look up at the stoplight and saw these words in the license plate frame of the car in front of me, and you can't really maybe see it from this far away, but it reads, "In case of rapture, car's yours." And that's the hood of my car at the front of that car in front of me. There's the last drive I ever took in my Camaro. And I saw that, and I knew that all that worry and that worldly attachment to a physical item washed away. And I knew that it was his purpose. I was in his will. And I took the picture because who's going to believe me, first of all? But it's real. If you see, and I've seen those license plate frames, and they usually say, "Car will be unmanned," or something other way of saying it, but it literally said, "Car's yours," meaning this car is for God. It doesn't go with me to heaven. It doesn't mean anything really, but anything on this earth. So I sold my car, and that's a picture of me with the guys that bought it out in front of our dealership, and I sold my car. So, praise be to the Lord Jesus Christ.
Hallelujah! Amen.
So, I want to end our message this morning and ask you guys a question. Is God calling you? Have you guys been praying and asking for God's call in your life? And if you're like me, it's not often. In hindsight, all of this is a clear picture. When I was in the midst of all those parts of the story that I told you, I was in a haze, in a cloud, and in a funk during those times. I didn't know God's will, and you got to seek it to get it. And then you'll know when it's done. So you see those Messiah warriors jumping up in the air. I want you guys to jump up after the service and do something. And I'll give you guys some recommendations because there's things we can do here. You don't have to go to Kenya to be doing God's will. So first of all, you can sponsor a kid. Those kids in that picture with Rose, they're not sponsored. They're all orphans, and they don't have sponsors. All of them. And all it takes is one kid per family in America, and they could all be sponsored. So I challenge you guys to maybe think about sponsoring a child. We visited a prison in Kenya. How many of you guys have visited a prison in America? I haven't. The only prison I've ever been to is in Kenya. I realized, why don't I visit a prisoner in our country? They need it more than the prisoners in Kenya, because at least the prisoners in Kenya are praising the Lord's name. They're not doing that here. We could go visit a prison. Maybe you have a family member in prison. Maybe just you can make a random visit. You don't know anybody there, and you'll touch someone's life because we're supposed to be there as part of God's will. And then you can do other things like the Spokane run. So that's me doing the Spokane run last summer. And what it is, it's a run in Spokane, and play on words, Spokane. And all the money in the run goes to Spring of Hope and supports it. It's on July 19th, and there's my little advertisement for it. And you can go to their website. You can sponsor the child right on the Spring of Hope website. You can join the run right on the website. And here's something we can all do. This is something for every one of us, from someone who's 4 years old to 94 years old, is you can pray. Because we don't pray enough. When the one thing that struck a chord with me, of all the people I spoke to, when we'd say goodbye to them in Kenya, they'd say, man, I'm so pleased to meet you because I know you're going to be praying for me in America. And I was like, holy cow, I don't know if I would have been if you didn't just remind me. Because I would have forgot, and I would have got back into my routine, and I wouldn't have remembered them, and I wouldn't have wrote down their name, and I wouldn't have prayed for them. And you can pray. And that's huge, because then other things will happen around you that you pray for that will fulfill the plan, even if you don't physically do the act or take the trip or whatever it is. So pray for the people going to Belize. Maybe God's calling you to help sponsor one of those people. Look in your program right now. There's dollar amounts that are almost done so they can go and have an experience like this. Maybe that's what your calling is. I don't know what it is, but I wanted to give you guys some suggestions because you can do something no matter what. So that's all we got.
Thank you. Is the website springhope.org?
Yes.
Exactly how it reads.
Spring Hope.
Yep.
Any questions? Yes, John.
Did David build finish his house?
So part of the car deal I didn't tell you is I took a trade-in. I have a $1,000 car that I took in on trade for my car. So I have $29,000 now, and I want to write a full check to him. So I'm going to sell that car on Craigslist this week, and as soon as I sell it, I'm going to give him the whole check for the full amount.
So I guess my question is, can we donate it?
So
go to that website and sponsor a child if you want to donate.
Yeah. What does it cost to sponsor a child?
It's $35 a month, and it's you get their picture sent to you. They draw a picture in crayon.
Compassion.
Yeah, and they
Yep.
send you a letter. And how it works is Spring of Hope doesn't take any of that dollar amount to administrative costs. It goes right to that child.
Okay.
And then they want you to actually, it's more than just a monetary commitment. You're supposed to write to them and encourage them from America. And so it's tough because we have 10, so I had to handwrite 10 notes the other week from the campus store. But like the one who strikes in my mind too is Felix. He doesn't have a mom or a dad, and then his mom's not even, his mom's alive, but she's not even there for him. You know what I mean? Like that hit me hard. So, but you can also do general donations, and then like you can give to, like if I know Rose, when we first heard Spring of Hope, she loved the economic empowerment and agricultural part, so she wanted to be a part of that. So if there's one part of it that you feel like God, that's in tune with what you do, you can give to just that portion of it. So,
Thank you.
Wonderful. Anybody else? Yes.
This house that he's building, does that include running water in there?
Yeah, it'll be a modern house. It'll have electricity. In fact, they were digging, they were breaking ground on putting the pipes in the ground then. And so Nairobi is a modern international city. Like when you go around Nairobi, there's real sky-rise buildings. Everyone has a car, or not everyone, but people have cars in Nairobi. There's public transportation. It's a city. So it's actually on the outskirts of the city near the airport. So what it'll be is people can fly in and then go crash at his house real quick on their way to their mission or whatever, and they don't have to pay, rent or a hotel fee. They just stay there for free if they line it up with David. So
And it's connected to a well system. There's a community well of that neighborhood, so they're all connected in on that well.
yeah. So the funny part is his sister lives in that neighborhood, and he said, "Hey, I can finish one of the rooms for you, so that you could kind of watch it and sleep there." And she felt too weird. She lives in a little shack on the property. Like you see, it's just culturally, it's weird for them to have space and a place for their own. So that was kind of crazy too to see that. I was like, I'd sleep in the big house.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing this morning.